Hi, everyone. My name is Cheryl Van Dyke. I'm coming to you from Taylorville United Methodist Church, where I serve as the Director of Education and Programming Coordinator. And I will be bringing you the first of what is hopefully a series of videos today, speaking about faith and families. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen real quick with the PowerPoint for y'all, and then we will go from there. Okay, so what you see here is a pretty fuzzy cover, sorry. This is the best image I could get of a book by Justin Whitmel Earley called Habits of the Household. This is a book written by a man who is married with 4 young boys, one of whom was born during the writing of this book. And I've read this, and there's a lot of information I want to share with families. Families and their children are only in church for an hour or so each week. And Christian education is an important part of being in church, teaching our kids about Jesus, teaching them to love Jesus, teaching them to follow the path that Jesus has laid out for us. But there's also a lot of time during the week when kids just aren't at church. They're in school, they're involved in sports, or doing other things with the family. And so it's important, I feel, in my job to share information with families that lets them incorporate God into what they're already doing at home. And that's what this book does. So I'm going to just share some information with you on this. I want you to think of the most chaotic time of your family's day. And while you're thinking about that, I'm going to read you a story that is the story of why Justin felt spurred to write this book. This is what he writes in the opening of his book. It was 8 p.m. on a Wednesday evening, and bedtime with our boys was not going well. Nothing was particularly wrong, but nothing was particularly right either. It was more of what most nights were. 2 had fled the bath and begun a spontaneous wrestling match, naked, of course, on the floor of their bedroom. The youngest had gotten involved by turning his board books into projectiles, apparently trying to break up the match by knocking one of the older 2 out. I had recently left my job at an international law firm and started my own business law practice. Lauren was pregnant with our 4th boy because clearly our house needed more Greco-Roman wrestlers. Life was then, as it still is now, fairly high-paced. On the way to the bathroom, I was debating whether I should get back to one of my clients who was in the middle of an investment round or first clean the kitchen. I was also racking my brain trying to remember whose toothbrush was the Superman one and whose was the T-Rex one. Because if I got this wrong, there was going to be more gnashing of the teeth than brushing. This was all interrupted when I almost slipped on some bathwater they had trailed onto the creaking floorboards of our 100-year-old house in Richmond, Virginia. I barely avoided a wipeout by catching myself on a doorknob that almost shook loose, and that's when the switch flips. I don't run out of patience nearly so much as I decide that I'm out of patience. The next 10 minutes are a blur. I'm barking orders and moving bodies from one place to another, but it doesn't actually speed anything up. It just makes us all tense. In such moments, I begin to feel like an impotent general shouting commands that, despite their volume, seem to have little effect on anything. Things like, I don't care, you are using this toothbrush. And I pulled the book out of your hands because you weren't listening to me. Or, no more drinks of water, we're done with water. Finally, I reached the moment I'd been waiting for. I turned the lights out and shut the door. But as I stood in the upstairs hallway, still damp with bathwater, I didn't feel the usual relief of bedtime being over. I felt conflicted and embarrassed. I was thinking about how this is a normal night, which means that the last image of me most days is of this wild taskmaster, raging about how if they don't get PJs on this instant, there will be dramatic physical consequences. I wondered if they sensed the irony when, before turning out the lights, I gave them a short bedtime prayer and told them that God loves them and I do too. I wondered what they think love means. I'm not sure why this night was the occasion for my epiphany, because it certainly wasn't an unusual evening. In fact, it was typical, which is exactly what led to my epiphany. This is our normal, I murmured to myself, and that wasn't a good thing. So, does that sound familiar? It probably does to most of us. I know we had days like that when my son was young. In the rest of this book, then, Justin Earley introduces the idea of family liturgies. And basically, a liturgy is just something your house already does. It's a habit that is in your household. And so we have liturgies. We have habits and routines. He decided that his family needed to spend some time and energy planning how do those liturgies point our children towards God. So the goal, as I go through this book, some sessions for this book in the next few weeks, is to create rhythms of the household that put God at the center of our lives. And usually we think of liturgies in relation to worship at church, but basically they're just habits. Liturgy is defined as a pattern of worship we repeat over and over. A family liturgy simply refers to the habits and routines of your family. So you're asking, why should I think about our household habits? Maybe things are working really well for you. Maybe they're not going so well, and there's some things you wish could change. Have you ever wished that you or your family had any of these things? A better start or end to the day. Justin described a pretty bad ending to one of their days. But mornings are just as bad sometimes when we're hectic. We're trying to get everybody dressed and fed and out the door to get to school on time so we can get to work on time. Those are some of the most hectic times. Do you wish you had more family meals together and more quality family meals together, possibly, where people are actually speaking to each other and not just looking at their phones? Do you wish you had richer conversations with your children and a calmer attitude when kids misbehave? And again, transparency here, when my son was young, I didn't always handle his misbehavior well and was not a good example of a godly parent. So we think about liturgies to help us in making our family and our home a calmer place, a place where God is the center. So our goals through this, to suggest some more spiritually healthy liturgies, and to recognize that the suggestions given may need to be adapted to your family. There's no cookie cutter family. Everybody is different. You've got kids at different ages. You've got kids of different temperaments. You have different schedules than other families. Things may need to change. These are just some suggestions that will be given on ways to incorporate God into your family rhythms. So things to remember. Every family is different. It is okay to adapt these suggestions. Start small. That's one thing you'll hear me say over and over throughout these videos. Start small. Doing something is better than nothing. Also remember those last 2 points there. These changes are not going to work perfectly right away. As we go through more of Justin's story, you'll see that they tried things that seemed like a flop at first, but the kids were noticing it. They were picking up on how things were changing for a positive outcome. And also, don't give up. It does take time to get out of a rut. So in the first session, we'll talk about in the next video is some waking and morning routine. So here's some things to think about. You think about a normal weekday morning at your house in one word. What would that word be? Chaos, calm, frantic. I think most of us would probably have words that lean more towards a frantic or rushed type of morning. Do you have morning routines? Maybe your household doesn't really have morning routines, but think about those if you do, and do they help you start the day on a positive note? And then another thing to think about, on a scale from 1 to 10, how much would you like to change the tone of a normal weekday morning? 1, everything's going well at our house. all the way up to 10, it's usually horrible. Things need to change. That is the end of the screen sharing and the end of our video. Please feel free to email me any feedback, call the church with any feedback. Next time you see me, stop and say, hey, I appreciated this. Here are some things that I would like to see though. My goal here is to equip families to educate your kids at home also in the life that Christ wants us to lead. So that is all for now. Thank you so much. And I hope you all have a blessed week. See you next time. Bye.